World War II shaped the lives of a generation. The war broke families apart, brought communities together, and turned a depressed economy into an industrial machine. On the home front, citizens sold war bonds and collected scrap metal for the factories. Friends were made and lost as a generation of boys was sent into combat. Penn State Public Broadcasting invited those who lived this history to share their stories of World War II.
I'm Russell T. Stover, 33152-908 number, and I was a PFC machine gunner in the 116th Infantry of the 29th Division. We served in Europe. 65 years ago, on October the 2nd, I was aboard the Queen Mary, heading for England. We hit a British cruiser 2 days out of Scotland and cut her in half, and 338 British sailors died. That was our introduction to World War II. This ship is huge. I was 4 decks down, and I heard that there was a commotion because of the scraping along the sides of the ship, but didn't know what happened. But I went up on top, and some of my friends were throwing their life preservers overboard for the British sailors that were drowning. We found out then, of course, what all happened, and we were quarantined and isolated for a while. The Mary couldn't be repaired. There's a great hole in the nose of the Mary. In England, because the Germans were bombing Southampton, the dry dock big enough to do it. So they put a false nose on the Mary and brought her back to America and repaired her. Had the Queen Mary hit the depth charges on that cruiser, the Queen Mary would be in the depth of the ocean over by going up by the south of England, and I wouldn't be here. So that was my first lucky experience. We trained in England then, and when D-Day came, it was going to be on the 5th of June, and they sent the minesweepers out early, and when Eisenhower changed the D-Day to the 6th of June, they tried to get in contact with these minesweepers and couldn't reach them. So they sent some boats out, and a British destroyer finally cornered these slow minesweepers over within sight of France and got them back. The article I read said Providence intervened and brought them back. Of course, they had to go in the next day then and do their work. But had the Germans known that they were there, I wouldn't be here there either. Before D-Day, we were evaluated by unit, and the 116th Regiment did the best of the infantry regiments in the 29th, and then my battalion, the 3rd Battalion, did the best of the battalions in the regiment. And the first order of battle was drawn up that we would go in at the Verryville exit, the western exit, where we would be linking up with Utah Beach to the couple miles to the west of us. And at the last briefing of Colonel Cannon, the regimental commander of his battalion commanders, he called on my battalion commander, Colonel Meeks, and said, "Meeks, are you and your men ready to die?" And Meeks didn't give him a West Point answer. He said, "Hell no, sir. We're ready to do our job, sir." Colonel Cannon changed the order of battle and put us in regimental reserve, and 1st Battalion went in at the Verryville draw. A Company went in while I was scheduled to go in. They lost 91 killed before they got to the beach, or on the beach. And on June the 7th, when they went off the beach, they had 8 men capable of continuing. Except for that remark, I wouldn't be here either. That is a picture they took of us wading ashore. I didn't know this was us until Eisenhower died, and this was on the article. And I focused on the man near the ramp, and I heard myself saying out loud, "That's Baker, that's Baker." Before that, I had clammed up and not done much about talking of my experiences. And then my subconscious said, there's another picture, and I got that out of the longest day, and then I wrote to archives. I wrote to Life magazine first, and then to archives, and they sent me pictures of it. And yeah, I was lucky there too. We got on the beach then, and took a while to get off of the beach because we mislanded by 400 or 500 yards. This man, Baker, near the ramp of the boat there, wasn't in battle dress when we were going into Omaha, and he had his U.S. buttons and cross raffles on, and also he had Jeep driving goggles on, and we said he should take those off. The sun would be reflected there, and he said, what sun? It was raining and miserable and awful weather. And when I got wounded that first time, Baker was maybe 20 feet or more back of me and to the right, and I heard this artillery coming in, and I got wounded from back and into my right ankle, and I was hospitalized then for Pitcock got me back to the first aid station that time, and I was hospitalized then and took out ordinary shrapnel, and it still didn't heal, and it started to drain pus. And when they did the last operation and took that out, on my bedside table were parts of a U.S. button on that bedside table that they took out of this right ankle. I was assigned to 465th Automatic Weapons Battalion, basically an anti-aircraft group, and we were attached to the 94th Division, 3rd Army. And Patton came up, and this was time of the Battle of the Bulge, and said we hadn't shot down enough airplanes because the German Air Force was being decimated. He said, I'm attaching you to the infantry. And so we were assigned to an infantry division, and our mission that morning was to fire into a big pillbox, the aperture of a big pillbox, in the Siegfried Line near Bulge, Germany. And this driver we had in the half-track, we had a half-track with 450 calibers on an electric turret, and he hadn't been under this kind of artillery before. And I was sitting back to feed ammunition to the guns, and I saw he was getting the wrong angle for firing into the aperture of the pillbox. And I jumped up to slap him on the helmet to tell him to change direction when he hit the mine. I had both legs, I was blown off the track and both legs broken, and had I stayed where I had been seating, there was a hole blowing through the track, I later found out, and I would have been killed or very much wounded through my spine. So I had both legs broken and laid there in the snow, of course, hot, and they picked me up, and then I was hospitalized for about a year. When 1st Battalion was decimated there on Omaha, I could have taken over their machine gun section and been a staff sergeant. And then I showed you that article about taking Grand Camp there. That was Lieutenant Nathan. Over in England, Lieutenant Nathan wanted to send me to officers' candidate school over there, but I'm glad I didn't, mainly because I had no college education. And most of our officers had college. I looked up this too. This is one reason why I didn't go to officers' candidate school in England. I looked up my lieutenant, Lieutenant Noonan. He lived in Rehoboth Beach, and we were in the area, and I had no address for him or anything. I said, let's try to look him up. So I kept asking all around, and finally we found where his cabin was, And I went up and I knocked on the screen door and I said, "Former Lieutenant Noonan live here?" He come to the door and he said the hair wasn't gray and you weren't wearing glasses, but you were one of us. I said, "Russell Stover." He said, "Yeah, you were that SOB." When the officers were briefed, he came back and he said, "Okay, you wise guys, where's it going to be?" I said, "On the best beaches on the north side of the Khotan Peninsula." They thought they had a leak and they pulled me out of there and quizzed me. I said, "No, I just made a study of it and this is where I thought we should land." And he said, "I'm glad." The next thing that came up then with Noonan was I wasn't prepared for his second question. He said, "Was I right or was I wrong when he gave orders to take a man in civilian dress carrying a rifle coming from an area where we had taken a lot of fire from and coming in our direction?" And he said, "Take him." That was 35 years later. That was on his mind all that time, and it just came out. Was I right or was I wrong when he gave orders to take? So our officers had to make many bad or difficult decisions. I pitied them at the time. There's a lot written about Omaha Beach. Everything seemed to go wrong. But the second article I wrote, I had read a lot of books by that time, and I focused on the things that went right. For instance, Rommel was away for 14 days. His wife's birthday would be June the 6th, and he was back in Germany. And the reserves for Omaha had not been alerted when they found out the invasion was going on. They were for back of Calais, but the reserves of us. The bad part of that, though, is that the 352nd German Division, which had seen action in Russia and was in there, and they told us they would be at St. Lo, and we could expect them to counterattack the second day, 20 miles away. But they were in the pillboxes when we came ashore, and that's why we took the losses we did. Mm-hmm. And that's why Omaha was as bloody as it was. People have been good to me, though. You talk about, except for bad luck of polio here. I came home and the local banker came to me. Well, I should go into some bad luck before that. They took my last chest x-ray and they said, "If you had a heart like this when you were drafted, you should have never been inducted." And I said, "That's a hell of a time to tell me now." And they said, "Avoid all strain and stress." And I said, "How could I do that? I already married." Just joking for my wife's sake. And no, I came back. I was all prepared to go to Penn State. I had enough time to get a master's degree in agronomy at Penn State, approved with the VA and Penn State. And then they said, "Avoid all strain and stress." And I asked them about going to Penn State. I was out of high school 9 years, and they said, "You better avoid it, all strain and stress." And the banker came to me and offered me a job in the local bank, $90 a month. I started out, and he was good to me, though. When I had polio, they had no health plan, but they paid my salary all the time I had polio. That first trip back, I knew where the bus was, and it turned down the Mullins Draw, which we opened up the upper part of. And they had me sitting across from the driver looking out the windshield, and suddenly there was a scene, and before I could process that, there's another scene where some were killed and some were wounded. For instance, my assistant gunner was wounded right on top of the bluffs, and the other machine gunner was killed that night when we started digging in for the night, Mr. Boyd. And then we kept going down the beach, and then we were down on the beach, and I I had breakdown and cried. But I wasn't the only one. Yeah, very traumatic when you go back and see where people were killed and where you had close calls. I lasted 11 days, and then I had wounds near the Martinsville Bridge in front of St. Lo. And they didn't take that St. Lo for a month then. And even then, they were lucky. They had one of these lucky experiences again. They were being counterattacked. This is my outfit now, and Major Howie was commanding the 3rd Battalion then. He became known as the Major of St. Lo, for when the general, I can't dial up his name now, the Gerhardt, briefed his men for the attack in St. Lo. He said, and then Major Howie said, "I'll see you in St. Lo." And a mortar barrage happened to come in, and he was killed. So General Gerhardt gave orders later that a group was to pick him up and take him in, and they put him on the rubble of a cathedral in St. Lo. But they wouldn't have got there had this counterattack come. And just as this happened, a fellow found 2 wires, communication wires, blown apart and detached. And he called his officer and he said, could he put them together and see where this goes? And he did. And here they had a battery of 155 howitzers. And the counterattack in St. Lo was come to nothing with the barrage of the artillery from those 155s. But Major Howie was commanding my battalion when that happened. And we were back in St. Lo then when a memorial to Major Howie was not decorated, commemorated, and I took part in that.